Welcome to the Backyard Professor Live. Here we are, Sunday night. What is it? March 8th, 6 o'clock Mountain Time in the United States of America. So, lots happening. Hold on. I'm getting a huge echo. Okay, here we go. Sorry about that. That was weird, man. I turned on my live stream on my channel instead of in the studio. Holy cow. That was wickedly weird. Okay, here we are. Okay, now I've got it right. Boy, I'll tell you what. It's astonishing how flummoxed I am with the world's events, and I can't even get on my own live show without problems. So anyway, here we are. I'm gonna say something, and I want you people to understand something really sincerely. It's time for prayers for peace in our world. I don't give a damn if you believe in it or not. Things are not right. I mean, we have music to face eventually. All I'm going to say tonight before I get started in my UFO program is it's time for us to seriously decide, do we want to be warmongers or do we want to be peacemakers? I want to be a peacemaker. I need to say that publicly so that you know what side of this fence I'm on. That's all I'm going to say on that front. There's so much to say. I'm not going to get involved with it just yet. So tonight, something interesting has been happening for the last week or two. And I've been thinking, that's so odd. That's so interesting. We've got dots that I'm going to connect tonight. Hopefully, sorry. I have had a runny nose all day. I hope I'm not catching a cold. So let's see some news issues that have happened that are interesting. And I'm going to, hold on, I got to adjust this real quick. I've got my notes set out so I can read them while I'm talking to you. Okay, that'll work. That'll work. Okay, so one interesting thing that has happened is Major General William Neil McCasland has gone missing. And I really hope that they find him alive and well. We don't know. I haven't heard any of the very, very latest, but this gentleman is missing. And yet it's become a UFO narrative. And the actual missing case, he's a former commander of the Air Force Research Laboratory. I mean, this is a big name. This man is well connected, and he knows an awful lot because that laboratory is at Wright Patterson Air Force Base. Very interestingly. He's previously associated with research programs at Kirtland Air Force Base, and he was last seen February 27th in Albuquerque. So I really do hope they find this gentleman. He left without his phone or without his Apple Watch, and that's two very big clues. Authorities issued a silver alert, which is a medical vulnerability. Apparently, he's got some medical issues, and the FBI are assisting local police. Now, they actually suggest, all of this suggests just a typical search and rescue profile for him. And I hope there's a lot of people that can help him out. The major red flags that investigators are focusing on is his phone and watch being left behind. He does have a possible medical issue, and apparently there's no witnesses to him disappearing. So we have four scenarios. I'm not going to be able to say the second one. We have a medical episode while he's been hiking. That's very high. He could have gotten disoriented on his hike. due to illness. That one's also very high. There's another unalived option that might be moderate, and there's a voluntary disappearance that is also a moderate probability. I watched a video of a live or a search and rescue video of him. I mean, it's got 7 million subscribers to it. And they also put this together, as several other YouTube videos have come out on this general. Nothing is unusual yet from a search and rescue perspective. The UFO angle is what this website focused on. They say it comes from extreme. In my opinion, the UFO angle is extremely weak, but he is connected to Wright Patterson. And so, of course, every one of us who hear Wright Patterson go right to the UFO angle, right? So he worked on the main science lab, and it works on propulsion. Here at Wright Patterson, it works on propulsion, materials, sensors, satellites, stuff like that, hypersonics. It's not a UFO program. The UFO myth comes from an older project. Ta-da! Which one do you think that is? Project Blue Book, absolutely. Well, that ended in 1969, but they did record some 12,000 sightings in Project Blue Book. The AFRL is not related to the Blue Book, though. The lab that this gentleman worked at is not related to the Blue Book. And then the second connection is the Podesta email. The other link comes from 2016 WikiLeaks email dump. In those emails, Tom DeLonge claimed that McCasland helped connect him with advisors, and yet McCasland never confirmed this himself. All we have is the claim from DeLonge. That's important to notice. And then the Trump-Clinton timeline. This program tried to create a dramatic timeline. February 19th, Trump says UFO files should be released. February 26th, a week later, Hillary Clinton deposition mentions UFO disclosure. And on February 27th, the very next day, McCasland disappears. So I think what's happening here is we are just putting a lot of coincidences together here. Humans see patterns even when none exist. And I looked up the statistics. 600,000 people go missing in the U.S. every year. Dozens of them are retired military personnel. So overlap events will inevitably happen, right? So, and another reason why the FBI got involved is not about the UFO connection. It's because he's a high military person. And they also have aircraft and radar. And so, I mean, they have the resources to search for a missing person. So that makes sense that they're involved with this missing military person. That doesn't imply espionage or UFO theory or UFO secrecy or UFO anything. See, that's being added into the story, I'm thinking. So the real key is if someone leaves a phone, a watch, or a wallet, it usually means that they're intending to disappear, right? Maybe there was a medical crisis. We just don't know. We just don't know. Search teams, unfortunately, see this pattern frequently. Now, the UFO community reaction pattern is also very interesting because of a narrative formula that we in the UFO community follow. Step one, a person with aerospace background. We have that. And the second thing is there's some kind of a UFO connection. And then, of course, the disappearance. Here comes the drama, absolutely. So we are assuming secret knowledge. And that's the narrative. And that's how things like this get hyped up. In reality, thousands of retired generals worked in classified programs through the decades. That's just the fact. Most have zero connection to extraterrestrial research. Wright-Patterson Airfield Base is not just all about UFOs. That's pretty naive thinking. So if this was an actual UFO silence operation, this is where the video got something extremely correct and didn't even realize it. If someone wanted to silence McCasland, they wouldn't do it this way. Of course not. It's a public disappearance would create national headlines. It would be massive search operations. There would be FBI involvement. There would be congressional curiosity. Covert programs avoid attention. So, I think right now that there was either a medical emergency outdoors, or he was disoriented somehow and just got lost, which is terrifying for the family. But it's rarely a voluntary disappearance. So I'm trying to say that the UFO angle literally has no evidence whatsoever in this particular story. One fascinating detail, however, in McCasland's actual career is worth noticing. He did work in space systems and propulsion engineering. So he would have probably known about classified satellites. He would have known about advanced propulsion systems for jets and rockets and so on and so forth, even including hypersonics. So that's military secrecy, though. It's not aliens. There is such a separation, right? So my honest take, I really think there's about a 95% media narrative and coincidence going on here. 5% of it is unknown facts about a missing person. The real tragedy here is it's a respected retired general who has gone missing, and we hope he's found, and we hope he's alive and safe and well. Well, there is a reason, though, why Wright Patterson keeps showing up in UFO news. And I've been investigating this and looking into this, and it's really interesting because it goes back to a 1947 intelligence logistics decision that involved the Roswell debris transporting from Roswell to Wright-Patterson eventually. And I've been tracking into this, and it opened up a whole bunch of other fields on a very interesting basis that I want to share with you tonight. Once we see the history, the entire rise of the UFO myth begins to make really good sense. The Roswell event. So we got to go back to the beginning. Roswell, 1947. Everything begins then. A rancher discovers unusual debris on his property. The military first issues a press release saying it recovered a flying disc. The next day, the story changed. This was in the newspaper clippings. The Army said it was a weather balloon. That contradiction created the mystery. The debris transportation route did not stay in Roswell. It moved through a standard intelligence pipeline that was used by the armed forces. So first you get the recovery of the debris. Then it's collected by personnel from Roswell's Army airfield. Okay, so step 2, you have to analyze the junk, right? So they did. What they did is they transported it to Fort Worth Army Airfield. There, General Roger M. Ramey posed for the famous photograph with the debris. This is where the weather balloon explanation was announced. So the final destination of this so-called UFO debris, and I'm not saying it was a UFO or it wasn't. I can neither deny or confirm, right? But the final destination was Wright Field, later Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. And this contained the Air Material Command, the aircraft engineering laboratories, the foreign technology that they were trying to exploit as foreign airplanes or bombs or whatever was gotten in their possession. They took it to Wright-Patterson to analyze it to see if maybe there's something useful here for us to learn about or to actually build for ourselves. So if the U.S. military recovered any unusual aerospace material, this is where it went. So why it became ground zero for the UFOs is really interesting, because they already had a secret mission. They were looking at foreign adversaries' weapon systems, aeronautics, stuff like that. They were already doing that. They had captured German and Japanese aircraft, which were being studied there. So when the Roswell debris arrived there, of course, rumors began. Wait, alien craft wreckage is stored at Wright Patterson. Aha! And that's where it starts to expand. Now we get the story. Oh, hey, they have secret hangars. They have the alien bodies. They have the underground vaults. Anything to make this thing more mysterious. None of this is supported by evidence that we have. But the logistics path, that's very real. So, and then this is the birth of the famous Hangar 18, right? The 1970s, the myth evolved into the famous story of Hangar 18. Woohoo! And this was popular after the movie. The film portrayed alien bodies stored at Wright-Patterson, and after that, the base became permanently associated with UFO secrecy, of course. What's the reality? What happened is still fascinating. Researchers studied captured Soviet aircraft, the radar systems, the missile technology, the advanced propulsion systems of that aircraft, stuff that they had, the stealth concepts. It was one of the most secret aerospace labs in the world, and that secrecy naturally fueled lots of speculation. And that's why the myth persists, because you do have real secrecy from the Cold War era. Absolutely. You do have the Roswell transportation route to there of debris from Roswell. Absolutely. And you do have the cultural amplification of the story. It grows. Books, films, documentaries, everything's being made about this. This is why the missing general story feels connected. The retired general once commanded the Air Force Research Laboratory at Wright-Patterson. So UFO media immediately links him to the Roswell myth. Of course, that makes perfect sense, but is it real is the question. It's historic lore, not evidence. So when people hear the name Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, alarm bells go off immediately. They say, wait a minute. But the reason the base keeps showing up in our UFO stories goes back to a logistics decision made in 1947 during the Roswell incident itself. And once you see that chain of events, the myth suddenly makes a lot more sense. This is one of those hidden Cold War stories. It explains a huge amount about UFO lore and expansion into the 1950s. Once you see the timeline, it suddenly makes sense why. Now we get to the why our own U.S. government was evasive and secret about actual UFO reports in the 1950s. Now we're beginning to see the reason why. And I've got more. This is called, the program itself was the Foreign Technology Exploitation. It's called the FTE for short. Fatigue. It's the systematic study of captured enemy technology. And this is the birth of exploiting the foreign technology. And after World War II, again, the United States suddenly acquired enormous amounts of advanced enemy technology, without question. And so the evaluation center for this work, Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. So the base housed what they called the Air Material Command. And this is the Air Force's primary engineering and testing of foreign war materials. Okay. They captured German jet aircraft. Now, remember, we had been in props for a long time, and all of a sudden, these jets are flying around way faster than our prop airplanes. We're going, wow, what the hell? So we wanted to get that. So when something was shot down, one of those jets, of course, the United States went and grabbed it, bring it home, study it, and say, wow, what is going on here? That's where Wright Patterson Air Force Base comes in. They had the main headquarters for just that type of acquiring of foreign technology. Soviet aircrafts and their missiles, radar systems, propulsion designs, they wanted to see it all. And this was classified, of course, under U.S. intelligence capabilities. So, Operation Paperclip, we've heard of this, and German jet technology. One huge influx of knowledge came through Operation Paperclip. German engineers had developed aircraft that were decades ahead of conventional planes, and we wanted to know what they did to get that. So, of course, we're going to get it. Shoot those plane jets down, and let's bring them in and look at these. The revolutionary jet fighter, I hope I'm going to pronounce this right, I may not, the Messerschmitt Me-262. This was the world's first operational jet fighter. When American pilots saw this aircraft during testing after the war, many thought that it looked completely alien compared with propeller aircraft. It blew their minds. And it was a puzzle in the Soviet technology too, because they were desperately trying to understand the Soviet aerospace capability. So they were acquired, their aircraft were acquired secretly through defecting pilots or intelligence operations or whatever. One famous example is the Mikoyan-Gurevich MiG-15. And this thing, when it first came, it was the jet with the round nose that was hollow. I think I've got a picture of it. I'll show you here in a little while. I hope I do. This shocked the Western analysts during the Korean War because they rivaled the best United States jets. In 1953, a North Korean pilot defected and delivered one of these jets intact to the United States. It was immediately transported to, guess where? Wright Patterson. They wanted to test this thing. So why this stuff produced UFO sightings? Imagine seeing one of these things in 1950. Most civilians had only ever seen propeller operating airplanes. Then all of a sudden, they see something fly over, they hear an incredible sound, and they don't see any propellers. Holy cow, what is that? It moves much faster. It has swept back wings, not these Sopwith Camel double wings. They're in a V behind the fuselage to its side. They leave unusual exhaust trails. It climbs almost vertically. Well, that's like nothing of conventional aircraft with propellers. And it reached impossible speeds. They reported seeing flying discs, silver objects. The public were seeing all kinds of weird stuff in the sky that they didn't know. And many early UFO sightings match early jet flight profiles that we have now. Now, there are very interesting reasons why the government simply couldn't explain to the public what was going on. Here's the key reason that the mystery grew. Because the Air Force couldn't explain it, because it would reveal their classified programs to the Soviets, the Japanese, everyone else. The Air Force, for example, if a witness reported a strange aircraft, the Air Force would know it was actually a secret prototype or a captured Soviet jet, and they couldn't say that. So the official answer became unidentified. And this is the policy that fed the UFO explanations. Hence Project Blue Book. Here we go. To manage the public reports, the Air Force created Project Blue Book. And I realize I'm giving a very simplified, more or less streamlined history of all this. I get it. There is much deeper histories to this than I'm giving tonight, but this is one way to look at it that makes really good sense. And I think there's something to this. 1952 to 1969, 12,000 views, 12,000 sightings, man. Most were eventually explained as either aircraft or balloons or astronomical objects or swamp gas or whatever they could, weather phenomenon of some kind. Hundreds remained unexplained, however, and to this day, there are still, I think I heard, 800 unexplained sightings. And there are people who are working on those. So that's interesting because they claimed insufficient data. So secret aircraft looked like the UFOs. The 1950s and 60s also saw the United States experimenting with aircraft that looked genuinely strange, really weird. The Avro Canada VZ9 Avo car literally looked like a flying saucer. It didn't fly like one. I've shown it in previous videos. It's a little round thing that kind of bumped around and hovered over the air and hit concrete behind it, hovering 3 or 4 feet. Didn't go very good, but they did make it look like a flying saucer. And they conducted tests, of course. Now, a Cold War information dilemma shows up. The government faced a really strange problem. If they told the truth, adversaries would learn about our secret aircraft. If they stayed silent, then the UFO mystery grew, and they chose silence. The silence allowed UFO mythology to completely explode. Why Wright Patterson became central to the legend? Because that's where they handled the captured enemy aircraft, the experimental prototypes, and the advanced propulsion research. It has everything to explode the UFO myth all out of proportion, and it was surrounded by secrecy. The secrecy involved into the legend that alien craft were stored there. And this is a huge historical irony because many UFO sightings were actually the very human technology of the Cold War. And that's my bombshell. And I'll show you tonight. Because the government couldn't talk about it, people filled the gap with extraterrestrial explanations. So there is a 1952 UFO incident over Washington, D.C. that caused national panic, and it also involved real radar alerts. The radar caught them. It wasn't anyone's fantasy or imagination. There was something flying over the White House and around the White House and all over Washington, D.C. This created such a panic with the United States Air Force that the largest press conference since World War II was held to explain it. And yet, when we examine the evidence carefully, the situation becomes much more understandable. This is why, and this was in July, 4th of July area, radar operators began detecting them. It went over the Washington National Airport, the Andrews Air Force Base, the airspace over Washington, D.C. They appeared on radar. They moved at very great speeds. They disappeared suddenly, and then they reappeared elsewhere, and that's what was freaking everyone out the most. They said, wait, how in the heck is that happening? And this caused concern for the U.S. Capitol. They did scramble the fighter jets in 1952 in Washington. Lockheed F-94 Starfires is what they sent out. Pilots usually reported that the objects vanished when their jets approached them. Very interesting. And then they reappeared after the jets flew by and left them. So this created the impression of something intelligently avoiding those aircraft, right? The radar operators were alarmed because they saw multiple targets moving around erratically. And some of the radar tracks suggested speeds of thousands of miles an hour. Now, back then, in the 1950s, not a chance, not even close to 1,000 miles an hour. And so, of course, that's going to spook people. And that's what gradually gained national attention. They had a press conference. John A. Sanford spoke. He announced that the radar signals were caused by temperature inversions. And of course, the public just howled. They mocked that explanation. They said, pure poppycock. Get with it, man. And that's why they thought the government was hiding something. But what is a temperature inversion? I looked into this too. This occurs when warm air sits above cooler air, warm air here, cooler air here, and they're near the ground. This can cause radar waves to bend and reflect, creating false targets. Airplanes, buildings, or even distant objects can appear on radar when they're not actually located. Where they're not actually located. And that is very interesting. That's radar ducting. Why this incident was so confusing is because early radar technology, the 1950s, were still being developed. It was kind of a new thing, the new kid's toy on the block, so to speak. They were extremely sensitive to atmospheric conditions. And with the heavy air traffic that Washington had, you had the commercial aircraft, you had the military aircraft, and you had all of the training flights to keep piloting more and more of these commercial aircraft, right? So there was a lot of air traffic around, and radar reflections could easily overlap. And then there's the psychology. Once they began seeing unusual signals, they started looking for lights in the sky. No question. Pilots and ground witnesses then began to report visual sightings, which reinforced the radar reports. Now, in a Cold War context in 1952, what we were worried about here in this nation was Soviet bomber attacks. That's what we were trying to prevent and understand. Radar anomalies over Washington, therefore, triggered serious alarm, and commanders had to assume the possibility of that is enemy aircraft, or it's some kind of an espionage technology going on. We just don't know what these different systems are, and we have to know for national security. So, a few historians suspect that the radar detections may have included experimental jets or classified, some kind of a classified aircraft, because they had early electronic countermeasures that they were developing as well. And so they were actively developing unusual aircraft in this time, and they didn't inform the radar operators that that's what they were doing. So this is why the UFO myth persisted. The Air Force explanation sounded weak to the public, to us. It always has sounded weak until just the last 5 years, when they are just bound and determined to get us to believe UFOs are real for some reason. Temperature inversion felt like a dismissive answer. And then you have the radar tracks and the pilot reports themselves. Back then, they weren't threatened with their job to say, hey, I saw something weird in the sky, right? And then you have the eyewitness sightings of John Q. Public also involved with that. So this became one of the most famous UFO cases ever. And the history lesson is this. We see now something about UFO reports that are very important. They arise when new technology arises. And of course, we have incomplete data and human perception all of that, when it combines in 1952, because radar was new, jet aircraft were new, not the props, the jets, and Cold War anxiety was high, these together create a perfect environment for mystery. And it's mystery that we got. The Cold War didn't just produce secret aircraft. It also produced some of the biggest UFO scares in American history. In 1952, the unidentified objects were detected on radar directly over Washington, D.C., forcing the Air Force to scramble fighter jets. So the CIA program that deliberately encouraged UFO rumors is a very interesting thing, because that actually protected the Air Force secret projects that they were working on. So they actually let the UFO hype go. They let the public believe it and develop it. They didn't correct it. So interesting. And we do have declassified CIA documents that describe just this. During the Cold War, the CIA realized that UFO reports were useful cover for secret spy aircraft. So they let it spread. The Lockheed U-2 jet. You know what? Oh, crap. You guys have seen pictures of the U-2. I didn't get this all set up in my crap. Hold on. I want to get this. Dadgummit, that ticks me off. I apologize. From my computer. Yes, I want to do this. U-2, that's the one. Let me show you this real quick. This is the U-2 that started a lot of the UFO rumors right there. The U-2 stuff right there. That little baby. Now, this was developed in the mid-1950s, see? And that was Lockheed Skunk Works. The U-2 could fly at about 70,000 feet high at the time. Now, commercial planes at that time only went 10 to 20,000 feet high. This thing was way, way higher. And the military fighters themselves only flew to 30 to 40,000 feet high. So this was still almost double that height. Well, that's way up there, far above anything anyone expected to see. Why it looked like a UFO? Because it behaved strangely to observers on the ground from that distance of height. You have a bright reflective object. You have it moving silently. Nobody could hear it from 70,000 feet high. It was traveling extremely fast compared to what we were used to, and it was at an impossible altitude. So the brightness was simple, of course, because at sunset, the plane itself is still in the sunlight, while the ground was already dark. So people saw a glowing object crossing the sky. Now, to me, that makes sense. And so we have an explosion of UFO sightings. The CIA later analyzed UFO reports, and they did notice something interesting here. After these kind of planes began flying in 1955, all of a sudden UFO sightings increased dramatically in Nevada and California and Utah and New Mexico, and that is where we were testing these U-2 planes. These U-2 planes. They originated over the famous base, Area 51. Now, what this later declassified CIA letter admitted in 1998, it said the agency calculated that more than half of the UFO sightings in the late 1950s and early 1960s were actually this plane, this type of plane, the U-2, or reconnaissance aircraft flights. The public simply had no idea aircraft could fly that high. Why didn't the government correct the reports? Because it very much helped them to fool all of our adversaries, letting the public say, yeah, it's UFOs. If spies were in America listening, they were saying, hey, yeah, man, those guys are seeing UFOs out there, right? They didn't want to give away that there was a classified spy plane being developed so that we could spy on the other countries. That makes absolute sense. And of course, therefore, they created high weather balloons just so that they could use that almost as a deferral. Of course, they used atmospheric effects and unknown aerial phenomenon, anything, or they simply left the cases unresolved. So now the next generation is this little baby, and I want to get this one in here. Hang on just one second, I'll get to this. Yeah, this little baby. This one was the puppy. Hold on while it's coming in. Okay, here we go. The next one, can any of you name that one? Do you know what that one is? That was a very, very famous plane. Very, very famous. This is the SR-71. This came after the U-2 plane. Now, the same pattern repeated with this. This thing went Mach 3 plus, 85,000 feet altitude. It was a much thicker, bigger bodied plane. When it accelerated, observers often saw bright flashes. They did hear sonic booms, and they saw streaks of light. And once again, the UFO reports were increasing. So something in 1953 happened, the Robertson panel. So earlier, the CIA had already worried that UFO reports would become a national security issue, right? So they convened the Robertson panel, and it concluded that UFO reports should be downplayed publicly because they don't want a panicked public, and they don't want to protest against classified programs. So from this point, they began debunking the UFO sightings. They reduced the public attention to the topic. Now, the strange Cold War trade-off is simply this. They faced a bizarre choice. Option A, reveal secret spy aircraft. Option B, let people believe UFO stories. And they chose option B because these actually protected our national security, which is remarkable. They downplayed it in order to agitate the public and get them arguing and talking about it in order to protect their secret spacecraft like this one. Very interesting. Ironically, this helped fuel our UFO mythology because they often gave us incomplete explanations or dismissive statements, or they just kept it secret. And that, of course, infuriated the public, who began looking for more complete explanations and looking for the truth. And so something extraordinary was being hidden. Now, the irony of all this is, of course, the UFO phenomenon was actually human technology that looked unbelievable at that time. We'd never seen anything like this at all. The public saw things in the sky that shouldn't have existed yet because the technology was classified. And when we follow that timeline, we can see something interesting in this regard. From Roswell transport to Wright Patterson, the Cold War capture of aircraft testing, the 1952 Washington radar scare, and the CIA using UFO rumors as a cover story for our own spy planes. What this does is it takes history and secrecy and the public understanding and perception, and it throws it all together. Now, there is also a reason for the many UFO sightings involving silent triangular craft. And this is interesting too, because triangular craft can be quite spooky because their size can be quite large. And that is what makes this so remarkably fascinating, is some triangle craft were really quite large. And that was spooking people because we had never seen anything like that. So it can't possibly be our stuff. And that was in the late 1980s. Witnesses across the United States and Europe begin to say, hey, we're seeing black triangles up there. And they were gigantic. And they had 3 bright lights on the corners, and sometimes a red light in the center. And they had extreme slow movement, and they were almost silent. Well, of course, that's going to scare the hell out of anybody who sees something like that. We don't fly triangles. We fly planes. How does a triangle get up there in the sky that is so big? Of course, it's got to be a UFO. And we saw these in Nevada and Arizona, even in Belgium and the UK. So this closely followed areas where the advanced aircraft testing occurs. And that's the key, man. The technological shift happened with the introduction of stealth aircraft. And I'm going to, hold on, remove that from the studio. Let me get this picture of a stealth aircraft so that you can see it, because now we've got several different kinds of these. And this is, let me get this one. I think this one's better. That's a cooler picture. There we go. While it's coming in. Isn't that a great picture? I love that picture. The Lockheed F-117 Nighthawk. 1988, man. It had been flying secretly since 1981. So you've got a 7-year gap there, 1981 to 1988. And this thing has angular surfaces. It has a faceted triangular geometry. It has black radar absorbing materials. And when the people saw this thing at night, before the program was public, they were a triangular UFO. Why that shape is because it's just radar physics. The triangular or the faceted surfaces help deflect radar energy away from radar receivers, and it reduces the aircraft radar's cross section. So what this did is it made it look nothing like conventional airplanes at all. Obviously, this was a UFO, and it was silent. Flew high enough, they couldn't hear it. If you're on a night with the full moon and all of a sudden this thing flies between you and the full moon, and you see it going between the full moon as a black triangle, and then it disappears in the night, that's going to scare the hell out of you, man. And that's what people were saying. They were saying, wow, wait a minute, what was that? And they always practiced and operated at night because this is a stealth aircraft. So not only did you want to avoid radar, you wanted to avoid a physical observation. Visually, it is much harder to see in night than it is in the day. A black triangle, a very large black triangle, would show up very, very easily against a blue sky at day. So, of course, everything's misjudged about these things now, too. The distance, the speed, the size. They can glide, which also makes them silent. And this is the famous series of sightings in 1989, 1990 over Belgium. Their radar detected unusual targets. They even scrambled fighter jets. And I mean, they still haven't solved this thing right now. They believe the sightings had involved advanced stealth aircraft tests. And then there's secret test location, Nevada test range, and Area 51. Of course, everyone there reports strange aircraft for decades. Yeah, exactly. And again, they stayed quiet because that helps. The more speculation that grows about this, the less the government has to worry about revealing some secret stealth technology. So they don't mind the UFO information being out at all because it's theirs. The irony is, it's actually the result of radar stealth engineering, not because it's from interstellar space. This makes sense from an Earth-based perspective, not an interstellar perspective from light years and light years and light years away. This shape would make no sense. Very interesting. And we've got I'll show you this. You guys have already been talking about it, I see. The TRS-3B, of course. And that is a very, very interesting craft as well. I'm going to show you the modern advanced update of it. This is not the original. This is the newest model, if I understand it right. Now, that is a wickedly cool-looking Star Wars type craft, but that's ours. Very interesting, man. And, of course, the TR-3B Astra. It's a massive triangular shape, lights at each corner, silent propulsion, anti-gravity technology, and extreme maneuverability. See, that's why they say this thing will go to space, of course. But that's not true. The legend didn't appear out of nowhere, though. The TR-3B narrative began in the 1990s, and it began with Edgar Fauch. He claimed he worked on secret aircraft at Area 51, so he described a triangular craft powered by a ring-shaped accelerator using mercury plasma. And according to his account, the system supposedly reduced gravity around the craft. However, no credible evidence ever supported this claim. Well, the propulsion system described is called anti-gravity, right? And in physics, gravity is explained by general relativity. So at this point, we just don't have a clue about how to use anti-gravity as a propulsion. So that's just the way it is. The first operation with stealth was with the F-117 Nighthawk, and then it's grown ever since. And triangular UFOs have been found ever since. So their secret prototypes are created at Lockheed Skunk Works, Northrop Grumman. They're tested in Nevada Test and Training Range, etc. So it's a practical thing. So when witnesses see the unusual aircraft and rumors spread online and artists create dramatic illustrations, and now we've got computer CGI, we can actually make an entire video of these things. New witnesses interpret sightings through that imagery. Over time, the legend becomes more detailed, and ta-da! We have our UFOs. That's where our folklore comes from. So that's pretty much what I wanted to share tonight, just to let you know that I'm going to say this. I hope they're real, but I don't know that. Now we do have, and it's the real deal. It's genuine. They could not explain absolutely every craft seen in the Project Blue Book. There's still, I think they said, like, out of the 12,000, there's 800 left. And there are people working on those as well. And now we've got all kinds of really interesting types of UFO vehicles. The most popular for now are the orbs. So, but realistically, the idea of flying saucers, no, you are not crazy if you saw flying saucers. You really did. The idea of black triangles, no, you are not crazy if you have seen black triangles. You really did. It's okay. You might have been ridiculed back in the 1980s and 90s and all that stuff, but now you know you really did see it real. But no, it was not an extraterrestrial UFO. It's our technology. Now, the crazy thing, and I know I hate this as much as some people do. I'm telling you, I don't like this, but Ross Coulthart came out and said he has absolutely been told by a very credible source that even the Fravor Tic Tac is human technology. And that should scare the hell out of us, because we damn sure didn't fund it, and we've had no choice in what is being developed. And that kind of technology unleashed can entirely change the world, and we're being left out of that equation. We, the people, apparently just don't matter, except to give them greedy sons of bitches all of our money so that they can develop technology to either destroy us like they're trying to do those poor Iranian people, or else enslave us. Crazy times we're in, right? Very interesting. So I wanted to just share that with you real briefly. I think it's remarkable when we take another look at this interesting phenomenon, and we take a look at what they are now declassifying, and it shows the same pattern as every new increase in technological innovation in our aerospace designs for our craft, as well as for the propulsion of our craft. Every time we make a breakthrough, the shape of UFOs change, and the time the breakthrough occurs is when the UFO explosion of seeing them occurs as well. That's not a coincidence. That's not to say UFOs don't exist. That is to say 90% minimum of the UFO hype that has been given to us for 80 years is us. You know, in a way, that kind of sucks. But I'm really glad to discover that. No wonder they won't declassify so fast. Because when you begin to see that, kind of takes some of the mystery out, and that kind of sucks. But on the other hand, I just want what's real. I keep saying that, and that means that we re-explore what we think is real. And we do it with as objective, if that's even a thing. We try to do it with as careful and useful and cross-check of all sources as we can, so that we don't end up having confirmation bias. And that's critical to remaining rational. And so that's why I'm not saying I'm refuting UFOs, all UFOs. I'm not saying I don't believe in them. I am saying we are in an age now where we have some readjusting to do in our thinking. And I'm willing to do that and share it with you if that's okay with you guys. Even if it's not okay with you guys, I'm going to keep sharing this kind of stuff. And when there is a legitimate and really interesting UFO sighting and stuff, I try to investigate those with what time I have and share them with you guys. So there's a lot of good UFO channels out there. I pedal as fast as I can to keep up with them. I can't do it. So I kind of try to do my own thing, which is a lot more fun anyway, because you don't want to hear me just repeat what everybody else says. There's no fun in that, right? Sometimes I end up doing that because someone before me breaks a really damn good story and it's too good not to discuss because I've got an angle on it that maybe they didn't. And that's what makes it valuable to be a commentator of others' stories. And if I don't have a really good angle, then I don't bother with it, right? I mean, that's how that works. That's just that simple. So, all right, you guys. I am going to head out. Fun night, fun topic. I hope you guys have a wonderful and blessed week. I'll be back with more because I really am doing some good, I am finding some really good research on all kinds of things that I just didn't expect to. And this was actually one of them because, you know, stuff like this in a way kind of takes the mystique away. And that kind of makes me not mad, but I mean, you know, I like having the mystique, but I like reality more. Dang it. It certainly hasn't matched yet what I've been expecting in this 65 years I've been here. So I am expecting more surprises. Hey, that's how it works. I didn't make the universe that way. You know, blame God if that's what you believe created the universe, you know. I didn't do it. I'm just exploring and examining. So, all right, you guys. Thanks for everything. I will catch up to you just as soon as I can. You're awesome. I love y'all. Have a good week and keep your eye on the channel. Hit like and subscribe and the notification button. I am coming back with a lot more very soon.